all, welcome back to my channel, Elemental Books. I'm Joey, and today I'm going to be doing a review on Sky Without Stars by Jessica Brody and Joanne Rendell. Okay, so what is Sky Without Stars about? This book is a Les Miserables retelling set in space in the future. So what people have come is they've come from the first world, and which is what they call like our Earth, I guess, and they've settled into these different planets. However, over time, the society has gotten more and more separated in different classes that are very specific. You can't really move up without a few different things like the Ascension, but this book goes straight into that, so I'm not really going to explain that. We have three main characters. Chatin is I'm just going to read the back, is a street-savvy thief who will do anything to escape the brutal regime, including spy on Marcellus, the grandson of the most powerful man on the planet. Marcellus is an officer and the son of a traitor. Groomed to command by his legendary grandfather, Marcellus begins to doubt the government he's vowed to serve when he discovers a cryptic message that only one person, a girl named Alouette, can read. Alouette is living in an underground refuge where she guards and protects the last surviving library on the planet. But a shocking murder will bring Alouette to the surface and plunge La Terre into absolute chaos. Each has a role to play in La Terre's future, but what the future will be is entirely up to them. So it's a very cheesy summary, very corny, like it's, the future is in their hands. They all are part of this big revolution, which they are, but it's not as dramatic as it seems. Let's get into my thoughts on the book. I rated this book 3 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. I liked it, however, I had many issues with it. As someone who is an avid reader of Les Mis and avid fan, all that kind of stuff, even though I haven't finished Les Mis yet, I'm like three-fourths of the way through, and if you go on my Goodreads, which is linked down below, you'll see that I actually have quite a bit left, but, because it's such a long book. But I'll get to it. I'm actually reading it right now. This book sparked me to read more of it, which I will say is a point of praise. If you like this book, you might get into the story of Les Mis. But that brings me to my first point of I didn't like this book so much, which was if you are a fan of Les Mis, you are going to be disappointed by this retelling. So this book was marketed as Les Mis and the Lunar Chronicles put together. So while I completely agree with that, I will say that the story of Les Mis is completely watered down in this story. The profoundness isn't really there as much, and the story is centering around the characters based off of Marius, Cosette, and Eponine. So in this book, that's Marcellus, Alouette, and Chatin. It took me a long time to figure out that those three were based off of the Marius, Cosette, and Eponine. Because this book wasn't very clear about it. Also, the story focuses around them and the revolution rather than the stuff going around with Javert and Jean Valjean, and we don't really get their rivalry and that point of contention where Javert sees the world as only black and white, where in reality it's all shades of gray. The story is like a shell of what Les Mis is. It's the story, and the backstory is mentioned of certain characters, but it doesn't really get into that as much. Because the story focuses around Chatin, Marcellus, and Alouette, the characters based off of the original, rather than Jean Valjean and Javert, we don't really see that whole forgiveness theme, that theme of forgiveness, that theme of redemption, that theme of people can change, and that is one of the most important parts of Les Mis. Although we do get kind of snippets here and there. The other thing is that the story is told, it starts in the second half of Les Mis. So if you've ever seen the musical or watched the movie, it starts in the second part, after intermission. So that's when, the revolution is happening, it's in full swing. We're not really talking about Fantine anymore. We're not talking about Jean Valjean and Javert as much, although we do get back into it later on in the story. And that whole dynamic is gone from this book, that whole beginning. It's not there. It's mentioned in little snippets, but one of the most profound parts, I thought, of Les Miserables was the bishop and his interaction and relationship with Jean Valjean, who he was the first person to say, you can change, you can be forgiven. This video is probably very confusing to you if you haven't read Les Mis, but then again, that's kind of what this review is about, so I'm sorry if you're confused, but maybe this video isn't the one for you. Basically, I just thought that this story was not a good retelling. It was a good book. I liked the story. It was not a good retelling. It did not give justice to Les Mis, and I was very disappointed by that as a Les Mis fan. However, if you've never watched or read Les Mis, I would definitely recommend checking this book out. It might get you into the spirit of Les Mis, and you might want to, after that, listen to the soundtrack, watch the movie, watch the musical, read the book, they're all very, I love all the adaptations. I will say that the book is really good. It's not given quite the same amount of weight as the musical doesn't have quite as much weight as the book does. However, the musical, I would say, is an excellent adaptation, and even though people do not like the movie, I actually did like the movie despite Hugh Jackman's terrible singing job. No offense, but like, yeah, he's a great actor, not a good singer. That's why they have him auto-tuned in The Greatest Showman. Anyway, moving on. The characters were not that great. Our main characters I found to be all really annoying. Chati, what I would say, was a morally great character. She was a thief. She kind of reminded me of Kaz Brekker, very much on her own. She's part of a gang. Her parents lead the gang that goes around in the frets. She's very much a victim of her parents, as other people are, such as Alouette, and you get into that as you read the story. But I will say that she is the only mildly interesting character, even though she is a very selfish character. She's not meant to be likable, and I didn't like her. However, I liked her as a character. I did end up in the end liking her, even though this book took quite a twist at the end. It didn't end how Les Mis ends at all. I do think that since this is the first book in the series, it's going to start as a retelling. This book is a retelling, but the next books in the series will be not a retelling, similar to how A Court of Thorns and Roses started being as a Beauty and the Beast retelling, and then moved on just as its own story with 3 other books. But I'm going on a tangent here, so I'm going to get back to the point, and that is that Chati was the only character who really had any personality. Marcellus was whiny. I hated him. He's an officer of the Second Estate in this book. He's very whiny, very spineless. He has no sense of standing up for himself until like the very end, but that's only after he finds out this one thing. And that's kind of disappointing. You have to be able to trust in people. You have to be able to stand up for yourself. You can't just go with whatever authority tells you to do all the time. And I understand that not every character can be completely badass and important, but Marcellus was just he did whatever anyone told him to. Whenever the rebels told him to do something, he was like, oh, should I listen to them? And whenever his grandfather told him to do something, he was like, oh, should I listen to him? And he never really made any decisions for himself until one point. And so I do think character growth, of course, but he overall didn't really have a personality, and he just did whatever the story said. And he seemed to be more of a plot device. That brings me to Alouette, who is the retelling character of Cosette from the original story. And Cosette lives father. She has also no character. She's also weak. She's very one-dimensional, just like Cosette is in Les Mis. Cosette, I feel like, she was more of a plot device in the original story, and Alouette was not a plot device in this book. She actually had a purpose, but she didn't have a character, which created this discord that didn't really work out with me. And so that's one really bad thing that this book did. It had a terrible set of characters. The whole cast of characters was very boring. The character that is Javert's retelling character, Inspector Lumiere, he's actually a cyborg. So, and I'm not going to say anything about cyborgs if they're not human or whatever, because I love the Lunar Chronicles and Cinder is a cyborg. But I will say that he was made out to be in this book as not really having a lot of feelings. However, he did have this grudge, and that didn't really seem very characteristic of his character, so it didn't match. Also, his rivalry with the character of Jean Valjean didn't really match. Like, it didn't have the weight as the original story of Les Mis did. But I'm going back to the beginning of this video, so let me keep on track. One more thing I would like to add about Chati is that even though she seemed very much against the Second Estate and very much against Marcellus, she found herself loving him all of a sudden without any sort of premonition. It just came on. It was like, oh, I suddenly like this guy. I'm suddenly blushing. She hated him and then she loved him. And I feel like that was not a very good written romance at all. It was like insta love, but worse because she hated him, and then one page later she's like, oh, I'm in love with this dude, I have to be with him, let me kiss him. It was just terrible. It was terrible. I hated this. But on to points of praise. World building was really good in this book. It is based off of 19th century France. We see references to Bastille, the prison, which in this case is on the moon. The moon is called Bastille. You have the three estates, the first estate, second estate, and third estate. Third estate being the lowest, first estate being the rulers of La Terre, the planet that they're on. It goes really into the system divine, which is like the solar system that they live in. It has several different planets, which make different countries. You see interactions going on between other planets, and I hope that the sequels to this book go into that, because I found that to be really interesting. There was this planet called Eusonia, which broke free from the clutches of Albonia, I think? Albania? I don't know how to pronounce it, but this queen of Albania, it was mimicking like Great Britain at the time, and Eusonia was like America, so you can kind of see those parallels with history, and I found that to be really interesting. Another thing is, it was kind of easy to keep track of. After I found out that Châtillon, Marcellus, and Alouette were based off of Marius, Cosette, and Eponine, I was able to realize, oh, these characters' names actually kind of rhyme, or they have some relation to the original names that they have in Les Mis, and that was really helpful as the story moved on, because I was able to see which characters in relation to which. This was very well done in that aspect. Another point of praise, the pacing was really good. I didn't find myself bored at all. I just found myself annoyed because it didn't live up to the original story. So overall thoughts, I will say that I liked this book. I recommend it for someone who's never read Les Mis. However, if you have, you might find it disappointing. You could still read it to see how it matches up in your opinion, because everybody has different opinions. For me, I didn't like it in that aspect. I still liked it. That's why I gave it 3 stars. If I didn't like it, I would have given it 2 or 1 stars. But I did like it. I just didn't love it, and it didn't click with me. It didn't have that same amazing and power and awe that the original story of Les Mis does. Definitely read that. Definitely watch it. Like I said, I stand by what I originally said. It's a good book, not a good retelling. I do think that it is hard to make a retelling of something as complicated as Les Mis. Much harder than it would be to do like something like Cinderella or Little Red Riding Hood, as we have in the Lunar Chronicles. I'm not knocking on Marissa Meyer or anything, but she's able to put so much of her own story into that because of how simple the original fairy tale is. Same with A Court of Thorns and Roses and any other retelling out there. But Sky Without Stars it follows a very complicated storyline with lots of a diverse cast of characters who have all different their own goals and motivations. They all have their own backgrounds. They all have these storylines that all interconnect. If you don't know what Les Miserables means, it means the miserable in French. So each of these characters is, facing their own problems and setbacks. But in this book, it's kind of harder to do that because it's hard to put that whole story, and just place it into this one other setting. And I think that to put your own spin on something that complicated is very difficult. So I will applaud Jessica Brody and Joanne Rendell for what they were able to do. However, I will say that maybe something in the future should not be attempted on this large of a scale, that kind of story. But I will say that maybe I've never read any of their other books, but maybe there are other books that are not retellings are good, or maybe simpler retellings. Maybe they should try that. So I'm just going to say that when this book comes out on March 26th, give it a go if it sounds interesting to you. It wasn't that great for me, but everyone has their own opinions. And please, if you like this book, know that this book is my opinion, and so there's that. So that was my review for Sky Without Stars. If you like this video, if you like my reviews, please tell me in the comments. Please like and subscribe, click the bell icon to get notified with each new video. I'm trying to post twice a week, so keep an eye out. And please tell me in the comments if there are any retellings you like, any you don't, if you're planning on reading this book, and what your thoughts are from my review. If you've got an arc from this, for this book, what your thoughts on it are, and I cannot wait till it comes out so I can see everyone's thoughts. That's all for now. Bye!